I was debating whether to give a share just on Hanukkah standalone or about continue our topic, but then I realized they're very much connected. So I'll play Darshan today and connect our theme of Breshit with Hanukkah. Okay, so let me share my screen. And actually, before I share my screen, something like more vacation time. I was listening to a couple of podcasts, and so this guy Micha Goodman has interesting stuff, but he was talking about how like a century ago, collective like place like what's communism and things like that. So the idea of a collective of society that was a big thing, and that fell apart. And then individualism started, countered that, and that fell apart. And basically, his conclusion was that part of society, you need a little bit of both. In other words, there's this idea of collectivism. I hope that's the right word. That the society, the purpose of society is for the sake of the society, and people are just, part of that. Or purpose of society is for the individuals. It's all, it's an old machloket. But it's just reminding me of what we're doing with two names for God. But what do you gain? Just like in human nature, there's a need to be an individual. The idea of like finding yourself as opposed to losing yourself. That was this nice chap. Nowadays you're finding yourself, but if you're like there's another gisha of losing yourself, being part of a greater whole. So a person needs to have to find himself and be an individual, but also has to be part of a group. And then, so just remind me of what we're trying to do, showing there must be some reason why Chumash intentionally uses two different names for God, because our relationship with God is not only b'mishor Elokim, not only b'mishor Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's a blend of the two, but I need to present them separately to appreciate them. And there was one other thing, which was he had a nice chap, which I wanted to add to, is that there's always something that makes people part of a collective. It's usually a common love, a common like people going to shul together, people like being in clubs together, people sharing a common heritage. So his chap is that what makes things so polarized nowadays is that what brings people together is common hate, not common love. That was his chap. So I want to add to it. No, it's still common love, but people love to hate. I was gonna write him that. In other words, he's still right that it's common love that brings people together, but the loving of that people love hating the other side. So it's still love is at the center, but it gets really bad when people love hating. So that was just one little add-on. Okay, that was enough of a stall till people sign on. Now we'll get to work. Okay. Um, Somehow we'll connect all this together. Okay, so today's class number 9 on our topic of Sefer Bereshit, and we've been following the topic of theme. And I gave those two perspectives of a deeper reason why Chumash uses God's name Elokim and sometimes Yud Kei Vav Kei. We'll see this in the covenants come. And today we're going to focus on the idea of sovereignty. Now, when I say sovereignty, I hope I understand the word right, that's when a country runs its own destiny. When a country is sovereign, it means it has an army, it can collect taxes, it makes its own decisions, it can go to war. But what makes a country sovereign is basically its right to bear arms, it has an army, and it can collect taxes. So, for example, in America, there's the United States, but there's one army and one federal system, and states take care of rights. But in Europe, there's the European Union, where the army works at the country level, not at the Europe level. There's a difference between the European Union and the United States. That's classic government stuff. And it's interesting in Chumash, the we begin as 12 tribes, but the armies works at the tribal level, like sovereignty works at the tribal level, and Am Yisrael begins with Yud Bet Shvatim working together coming out of Egypt. But when we come into Israel, we sort of fight together, and then every Shevet's on his own. It takes a while until we have one united kingdom under Shaul and later under David. So the idea of sovereignty is going to be important. And one of the main things we're celebrating on Hanukkah is the return to sovereignty in the Second Temple period for the first time since the first temple was destroyed. Just a quick review of the dates. There's the first temple period from the time of Yeshua, Am Yisrael is sovereign in their land. From the time of the conquest of the land, from the time of Yeshua, all through the first temple period. We lose it with exile, with the Babylonian exile, Babylonian conquest. When we turn in the beginning of Beit Sheni under Persian rule, we're still under Persian rule and we're not sovereign. And then the Greeks take over from the Persians and we're under Greek rule. The first time in the Second Temple period, where the Jewish people are masters of their own destiny. They return to sovereignty is under the Hasmoneans, which is like some 300 years into the Second Temple period. It lasts for about 100 years. Now, the Rambam, I'm sure you remember, in Hilchot Hanukkah, talks about what's so special about Hanukkah is that Malchut sovereignty returned to Israel after for almost 200 years during the Second Temple period. So Rambam in Hilchot Hanukkah makes a big deal in the very beginning about we're celebrating our return to sovereignty during Beit Sheni. So that's our connection to Hanukkah. The concept of sovereignty I want to show you begins with Brit Ben Abtarim, which is the second theme, the second Brit in Breshit. But now we can start our topic. That was my introduction. I want to talk about why sovereignty is so central to the theme of covenant in Sefer Breshit. Then later how it relates to Hanukkah and why we light Hanukkah candles. That's a little introduction. Now we get to work. Now we'll start to share. A real quick review. We've been following the progression of topic of covenant in Breshit and then to Shmot. So we followed Brit Keshet, the rainbow covenant, on the universal section, which is parallel to the Brit Milah, the circumcision covenant, in the particular section when God picks Abraham Avinu, with the common words, with God's name Elokim and Beini Ubein, and all those key phrases we talked about last week. And we tried to suggest that the thematic connection between the need for Brit Milah in light of the God's promise not to start over again in the rainbow covenant that's going to be the background to why God needs to make a special relationship, special covenant with his people, and why the wording of Brit Milah might relate to the wording of Brit Keshet. But we didn't talk about yet, we just touched on it, is there'll be another Brit in Sefer Breshit with God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which actually the first Brit God makes with Abraham Avinu called Brit Ben Abtarim. We just began that last week. We have to go back to it this week. But before we went to Brit Ben Abtarim, I wanted to show you that the theme of Brit Milah finds itself not just in Breshit, but you see it in Har Sinai. We saw the same phrases in Brit Sinai. Remember, the Brit of Brit Milah was Liot Lach Elohim, I'll be your God, you be my people. And Beini Ubein and Ot Brit, and the sign of the Brit, like we had in Keshet Milah. Therefore, I showed you in Shmot, after we have a physical symbol, reminder of our covenant in Har Sinai with the Mishkan, we have our reminder of the Brit in Har Sinai in the realm of time with Shabbat. And that was the pasuk we read. And at the end of the loss of the Mishkan, God tells Moshe, tell Bnei Israel, make sure to keep Shabbat. Ki oti, it's the ot, beinu, Menachem. These are all the phrases we talked about last week. It's an ot of a Brit. Ki ani Hashem HaKadishchem, that's Brit Sinai. Atem tiudim mamlechet koni v'goy kadosh. And then in a beautiful way, the end of Vayikra for sure, and also in Shmot, we see a beautiful connection between Brit Sinai and Brit Milah, and the idea, I'm your people, you're my God, and you're serving me. Now, I can appreciate all that without the need of Brit Ben Abtarim. On the other hand, as we'll see, Brit Ben Abtarim is going to focus on the need to go into slavery and oppression in someone else's land. And when we get to Brit Sinai, it's not only Ani Hashem Elokechem, I'm your God, but I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. Like coming out of Egypt and redemption from slavery is going to be a big theme at Brit Sinai as well. And basically, we're going to see Brit Sinai brings both Britot together, both covenants together. So I want to show you, I have to go back now and try to explain why we need these two covenants in Sefer Breshit. So again, one last review. We did Sefer Devarim, the introduction to the Ten Commandments in Devarim was Hashem Elokeinu, remember? Hashem, our boss, all through the book. It's not our God and no one else's God. He's everyone's God. Hashem Echad, but he's our boss, and he made the covenant with us at Har Sinai. Therefore, all through Devarim, Hashem Elokechem or Hashem Elokeinu doesn't mean he's our God and no one else's God. He means he's everyone's God, but he's our boss, and we're chosen to serve him. Now, when we saw the two coming together, we saw them in. We'll see them in Sefer Shmot with the 4 cups. We say the Seder, Votzeiti, Vitzati, Vegalti. We'll see that's going to be Brit Ben Abtarim. And then what we focused on last week, that's the phrase of Brit Milah. And therefore, these 3 is getting out of Egypt, the first 3 cups. The 4th cup is Har Sinai. That's going to be the Brit at Har Sinai. And then you can't miss it, because then you'll know when you get to Har Sinai, Ani Hashem Elokechem hamotzi etchem mitachat tzivot Mitzrayim. That's the first line of the Ten Commandments of the Dibrot. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher tzivticha mi Beit Avadim mi Mitzrayim. And then entering the land is going to be the next step after Har Sinai, which God wanted to give Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And see the word Morashah, that's going to relate to Brit Ben Abtarim. Anyway, we have to go back to this later, but both Britot are alluded to in the beginning of the Exodus story. That's in Parsha Vayera before the plagues begin, and they be fulfilled in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim going to Har Sinai and later conquering the land. Okay, so with that in mind, that was just my little introduction and review. Now I want to take a quick look at Brit Ben Abtarim. Now, remember we talked about that the last time that Elohim speaks to anyone is the rainbow covenant with Noach and his sons. That was in chapter 9 in Bereshit. The next time Elohim spoke was Brit Milah with Avram Avinu in chapter 17 when Avram's already 99. But from the beginning of Lech Lecha, when God begins talking to Avram Avinu and begins a whole relationship with Avram Avinu, God's name is exclusively Yud Kei Vav Kei, or called Shem Havaya or Shem Hashem. Now, God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu many times in chapter 12, Lech Lecha. Begin your journey. I'll make you a great nation. I promise you the land and children, etc. God's name again is exclusively Yud Kei Vav Kei. But in chapters 12 and 13, it's a one-way conversation, meaning God speaks to Avram Avinu. Avram never says anything back to God. God speaks to him in chapter 12. In chapter 13, he repeats the same promise after Lot leaves. Chapter 14, we'll get to in a minute. There's no dibur there. And then chapter 15, it'll be God's name will be Hashem. And also in chapter 16, Elohim doesn't come up again until chapter 17, speaking to Avraham Avinu. But what's unique about chapter 15, it's not, it's the first time there's a dialogue between God and Avraham Avinu, and it's the first time we have a covenant. In other words, God's making promises to Avraham Avinu, giving him directions and speaking to him, but the first time Hashem has a dialogue with Avraham Avinu and enters a covenant is going to be chapter 15, therefore it's got to be important. And I think I mentioned there's only two dialogues between God and Avraham Avinu. That'll be chapter 15, Brit Ben Abtarim, and then the story of Sdom in chapter 18 and 19. Now, just as a way of background, in chapter 14, there's the famous war of the 4 kings and 5 kings. And how does that end? Basically, the kings of Mesopotamia come and capture the 5 kings of Canaan. Avram comes to the rescue and is able to defeat the 4 kings of Mesopotamia to kick him out of the land, and returns everything back to the people of Canaan. But basically, it's the first time that Avram conquers the land. Keep that in mind. And therefore, when Brit Ben Abtarim begins in chapter 15, after these events, in simple pshat, it's referring after the events of the war of the 4 kings and 5 kings. Now, let me stop the share for a second. I want to open up a regular Chumash for a second and do the English part. Look at the end of the war of the 4 kings and 5 kings. Melech Sdom, Avram meets Melchizedek, remember? And Avram, he blesses Avram answers back without getting to the topic of Elohim. But here we have a song for Shabbat, Uborch Elohim, Asher Migein Sarecha B'yadecha. And then Avram gives Melchizedek 10%. Then Sdom, Melech Sdom makes an offer to Avram. Avram doesn't want to take anything from Melech Sdom. And then that's the end of the story. But we have a couple of key words in the end of Brit Ben Abtarim, in the end of the war of the 4 kings and 5 kings that repeat themselves. The word Magain and and the idea of conquest. Now, in light of that, take a quick look how chapter 15 begins. I think we talked about this briefly. If you're going to start a conversation, I expect God to begin the conversation, to begin the dialogue. And God begins in a very Jewish way, telling Avraham Avinu, don't worry. Remember, God's opening word to Avraham Avinu to spark a conversation is, Al tira Avraham, don't worry, I'll protect you. And this phrase, Anochi Magen Lach, is going to come up all through davening, especially in Shemona Esrei. Remember, Magen Avraham, the idea that God protects us, that's going to be the background to the covenant. We have to return to this opening statement very soon. Okay? And then Avram is going to respond. Now, I'm going to go back for a second. I'm going to go back to the English in a second. I just want to show you the pattern of what's going to happen in Brit Ben Abtarim. Let me share this real fast. Okay. there'll be two conversations in Brit Ben Abtarim. One conversation, the first six psukim, focus on offspring, on Zerah. The second conversation is going to focus on possession of the land. It's called Yerushat Haaretz. Now, God promised Abram in the beginning, the Zarachan Natati Haaretz, your offspring will get the land. He says the same thing after Lot leaves in chapter 13. Which you're saying you and your offspring will get. So the idea of Zerah Haaretz is in every single promise that God gives Avram Avinu and all the Avot. But in this dialogue between God and Avram Avinu, this conversation, there are two parts to the conversation. The first part focuses on Zerah, and the second one focuses on Haaretz. So that's following the pattern, but there's something unique that's added on that we didn't have before. Now, what's parallel to the two conversations? It begins with an opening statement by God. Here it's Al Tira Abraham, etc. The second conversation begins also, I'm the God who took you out of Ur Kasdim. God's opening statement causes Abram to ask a question in response to that opening statement, and God responds to Avram's question, or Avram's response. And then it concludes with the final statement. You follow that? There'll be a statement by God, a question by Avram Avinu, God's response to that question with some type of special action or sign, and then a final statement by Chumash. Got the pattern? So I want to pay attention to that, and we'll try to give meaning to all that in a minute. Now, the opening line, I'll share a discussion on this, and I'm going to close the share in a minute. Put yourself in Avram Avinu's position, right? And God's speaking to you and tells you the following, okay? And after these events, God spoke to Avram saying, Al tir Avraham, don't worry, I'll protect you, okay? You have great schar, you have great reward. That's three different statements. Number one, don't worry, okay? I'll protect you, and you have great schar. Now, if you don't read any farther, if you were Avram Avinu, I'll share my, I can share the screen now. Let me put the view on with everybody. Gallery, there we go. If you were Avram Avinu, well, how would you respond to that? Which of these 3 points would you expect Avram to respond to? Don't worry. Someone tells you, don't worry. I'll protect you. You have great schar.
Yeah. Schar for what? What did I do?
Or what's going to happen to me that should be worried.
Yeah. In other words, wouldn't you respond first when someone says, don't worry? I always joke around an Israeli tour guide, don't worry, I have a gun. Don't worry, we have Iron Dome. So that means
I think the question is, what does it mean, אחר הדברים האלה? So if he says, אחר הדברים האלה, why should Abraham worry? So my question is, אחר הדברים האלה, and then he says, don't worry. So maybe something happened that he should worry. So that is
so Chazal on the spot say, Avram's worried, two things. One is repercussions. You go to war in the Middle East and you take over Mesopotamia, they might shoot rockets back at you. You have to be careful in the Middle East. The fact you won one war doesn't mean it's over. It hasn't stopped, has it? No. It's amazing how the War of the Four Kings and Five Kings is like history repeating itself over and over again. And there's a logical reason for it also, when we talked about the map the other day in the two centers of civilization, which will relate to Brit Ben Abtarim, we'll see soon. But the other thing is, Avram had so much hatzlacha, had so much success in the war, maybe he used up all his brownie points. That's another approach in Chazal, right? So Avram's worried. In other words, is Avram worried and God's telling him don't worry? The question is, is Avram, here's the two different approaches. Avram must be worried about something, and therefore God says don't worry.
Right.
Or Avram's not worried about anything except the fact that God just told him don't worry. Now, if someone says, you understand the difference between the two? Now, therefore, the approach that Avram's worried because he just won a war and he's worried about repercussions and retaliation, so God says don't worry. Right? But if there's nothing for Avram to worry about, then what's he think God's talking about? Understand? So I can relate to don't worry. I can relate to don't protect you, which is pretty much goes together. And schar. What schar is it? He didn't say what the schar is. What's the reward? Now, from what you remember, which of these three does Avram respond to?
Sachar. Because he says, I'll go Avivi.
Which is surprising, isn't it? It's super surprising that Avram, all the Parshanim talk about don't worry. And Avram talks about the schar. And what seems to be, though, in other words, what's latent in Avram's question about the schar? What's Avram really worried about? Put yourself in Avram's position.
Continuation. The
He has no
continuation.
children, right?
That's
No, you would think that when God says "Don't worry," it's about children. That's like the sublime message behind it, because that's hiding behind Avram's response. He goes, "You can promise me everything, but what good is it? I don't have children." And therefore, I think Avram is assuming when God says "Don't worry," Avram thinks it relates to Avram's fear about not having children, especially now that Lot left and Lot's back, but Lot's he went back to Sodom. So Avram says, even if you give me schar, what good is I don't have children, which is a nice way of saying what's going to be with children. Okay. Now, does God allay that fear? Now, that's why the first topic is about children. But basically, God says, don't worry about that. So let's read that real fast. So let's read the first part because I want to get to the second part. So let me share my screen again. Let's just look at the English. Okay. Avram says, by the way, the first time, Chazal pick up on this, the first time that anyone calls God Adon. Right? The word Adon, that's what we use for Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei is Adon, called Shem Adnut, master, like my master. So Avram is the first one to call God Adon. Chazal pick up on that, right? And what do? We read this Hashem Elokim, don't we? But in the Hebrew, it's Adon Yud Kei Vav Kei. I can't pronounce it, so I don't know what to do here because I just say Shem Havaya. No, it's Shem Hashem. But it's our minhag is because we use Adon for Yud Kei Vav Kei, when Adon and Yud come together, all of a sudden we put Elokim into the thing. But what's really amazing, if we follow Unkelus, I was paying attention this week. Unkelus always translates Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim with Yud Yud. Whenever he has Elokim, it's always Yud Yud. And sometimes he adds what Unkelus's translation of God's names through Chumash. Whoa, the Rabbi makes a big deal about it. You need a guest lecture for that. That's something amazing. But what's really interesting is Avram is the first one to call God Adon, right? And at the end of this whole unit, what happens? We're going to be slaves. There's something ironic in this story. But I think there's more than just ironic. I think there's something there. But now I'm just going back to my topic, is that God says, don't worry, I'll protect you. Remember three things. Don't worry, I'll protect you. You have great schar. And Avram turns to God with Shem Adnut. Okay. What schar is relating to the schar? What can you give me? I have no children. And who's going to take over everything I possess? No, any schar you give me is going to go to my CEO, to Eliezer, who's running my household. Now, and then this is the classic Vayomer Vayomer. Notice that what happened in between? There's no response. So Avram is trying to explain what he said. Did you understand what I said? Now he's going to explain. Hey, Lilo Natata Zera, B'nei Ben Biti Yoreshuti. He didn't say anything new, did he? Yeah. But what's really interesting is we have for the first time the word Yoresh. If I'm not mistaken, it's the first time. Let me just check real fast. I did where is it? Is this here? Yeah, Yoresh. This is your word Yerusha and Chumash. Yeah, here's the first time. The first time we have the Shoresh Yerusha in Chumash is here. Okay, do you see my Ala Torah screen? I did.
Yes.
It's a lot. See the Tarshim 10 times in Breshit. We'll go crazy in Devarim because we're about to conquer the land. But we're going to make a big deal about the word Yerusha today. That's a key word in Chumash. But let's go back to Breshit. So and now to this, God responds. V'hinei dvar Hashem elav lemor, lo yirash chazeh. I should have highlighted it again. See what does? It won't be Eliezer. One of your own offspring is going to possess what you do. Because anything you get will go to one of your children. So basically, Avram clearly is worried about children, and that's like the hidden fear behind it. He's talking about schar, but God's saying you'll have children, and they'll get the schar that what I'm promising you will come to your children. And to prove it, what does God do? He takes them outside, says, look at the sky, count the stars. If you count them in Kol Yezarecha, it's famous Kochvei HaShamayim. Remember that phrase, Kochvei HaShamayim, okay? Kochavim and Shamayim, Brit Ben Abturim go hand in hand. They'll always go together. Keep that in mind. It comes up a lot of times in Chumash. Why that analogy? Not for now. Okay. Now, V'min Bashem, that's Avram, trusted God. What emunah means, a topic in itself, but I'll put there he trusted or supported God. V'achshvu l'tzedakah, look in the Parshanim. Okay, notice who considered did Hashem consider Avram's trust as tzedakah, or did Avram consider God's promise tzedakah? That's a great. If you're teaching Parshanut, that's just a great topic. It's irrelevant for today's shir, but it's important. Now we get to our topic. This conversation is closed. It's over. Correct? I could stop right here. Avram, if I go back to my opening statement, if the opening statement was, don't worry, you're going to have children, case closed. That's it. What I want to claim is, when God said, don't worry, he wasn't talking about children. Avram thought he was. God wasn't. Now, the topic of children only comes up because that's Avram's opening response. God gets Avram into a conversation. In other words, he sparks a conversation. But now comes the real conversation. Now God comes with the bombshell. With what? And God tells him, "V'yomer elav, Ani Hashem, asher tziticha mi'or kasdim, v'tet lecha et eretz hazot l'rishta." Now, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm wrong, I think this is the first time God identifies himself, isn't it? Remember? And when God identified himself to Yaakov, he says, I'm the God of Abraham and Yitzchak. When God identifies to Yitzchak, he says, I'm the God of Abraham, your father. But has God ever identified himself at the burning bush? God says, I'm the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the God of your fathers. Has God ever identified himself to Avraham Avinu before? Asher, you remember, right? Has he? Asher, you were saying something? Unmute. Asher, we don't hear you. Asher? Okay,
Okay,
now we hear you.
sorry.
Okay.
In Parshat Lech Lecha, God speaks to Abraham, says, you have arrived here. I'm going to give, and he makes two promises, land and children.
Yeah, Zerav Haaretz, exactly. But
So,
he doesn't identify himself.
having said that,
Yeah.
domestic Eliezer isn't Zaracha. So,
Yeah.
basically, Abraham here is showing a lack of emunah.
So Chazal pick up on that, and they say, maybe I lost my brownie points. Now, Chazal pick up, why? Maybe because I went down to Egypt during the famine, maybe because I took my Shiva Bakrim to war. We talked about this last week a little bit, I think. All the Midrashim on here. But all I'm getting at is God hasn't identified himself yet, like he usually does. This is the first time that God says, Ani Hashem, in historical context, right? Now, when Avram left Ur Kasdim, why did Avram think he left Ur Kasdim? This isn't Haran. Ur Kasdim is by the Persian Gulf, if I'm not mistaken. Haran is up in Syria, soon to be Israel. Now, if you read the end of Parshat Noach, why did Avram think he left Ur Kasdim?
Because his father took him with him.
That's right. The family was making Aliyah. Remember? For whatever, we don't know for what reason. It was a nomadic family. They were moving to a different place, and they stopped in Haran on the way there. What's God telling him? That wasn't daddy, that was me. You follow? There's the reason it's God's telling Avram Avinu, that wasn't your father, that was me who took you out of Ur Kasdim. Right? And what was the reason? To give you this land, l'rishta. Here's the big line. In other words, I'm making a big deal about it because I'm the God of history. Everything here will be the God of history. You can't miss it. Remember, in the Ten Commandments, Anochi Hashem asher tziticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, Beit Avadim. Right? Now, there's Elokim was always nature. The number's always going to be 7. Remember, nature, natural, like things through nature. Even Pruavu is nature. Brit Milah relates to nature. Now, but now this is the God of history. And I took you out of Eretz, this land, right? To give you this land. The Rishta doesn't mean to own, but to possess. I don't like the translation inherit because it means to possess. Yerusha is always military conquest. Not always, but usually. I'll prove it to you. Okay. You can also get a Yerusha in Yiddish is when you inherit something from somebody else. You get a Yerusha. But Lareshet is military conquest. I can prove it. Not, it's not exclusively military, but usually that's what it means. In this context, for sure. Got it? Now, why does that relate to the 4 kings and 5 kings? Because what Avram just do? Remember, God promised him the land, didn't he? And Avram just conquered the land. That's God promised Avram, as Asher said, land and children. In the meantime, no children. In the meantime, no land. What? That's not true. In the meantime, he took the land, but what's called Masavat Simil Labanim, he conquered the whole land and gave it back. Okay? That's going to happen a lot through Jewish history, especially modern times. You conquer and you give it back, but why? You have no one to give it to. Maybe had he had children, he would have kept it. But the idea of this must relate to the 4 kings and 5 kings, because he just conquered the land, and now God's saying one day, right? Your offspring is going to, what do you call it? To conquer this land and possess it. That means sovereignty. I think Rishta and sovereignty go hand in hand. That's what's important.
I have a question. Then if Abraham built an altar like a Mizbeach for God before, isn't that a recognition? Because that was when he came to the land.
Okay, but he's calling out in God's name. God's presence is felt. Yud Kei Vav Kei is not exclusively history. But whenever God talks about history, his name will be Yud Kei Vav Kei. Okay? Now, Yud Kei Vav Kei doesn't equal history, doesn't equal Midat Rachamim, etc. But whenever Midat Rachamim comes up, it will be Yud Kei Vav Kei. Whenever history comes up, it will be Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's not a defining element, trait, but it's typical.
But that's what he calls when he builds a Mizbeach. He calls Yud Kei Vav Kei.
In the name of, he's talking about God. Yud Kei Vav means God's presence is around. He talks about the concept of God who's involved in our lives. Now, which includes history, but also it's God who rewards and punishes. But God's involved in the history of nations. Now Avram asks the famous question, okay? Now again, Hashem Elokim, that ties, see how the two conversations are tied together? Remember, again, Hashem Elokim, we had up here, Hashem Elokim. Remember in Avram's response, Hashem Elokim, God makes a statement, Avram says Hashem Elokim. God makes a statement, and Hashem, he says Hashem Elokim, or Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei, okay? And now the most difficult question to understand, what's he asking? But Ma'ida Ki Roshena. Now, it can't mean he's not trusting God, because he just said he trusted God. Now, when I teach this, we're going to play Jeopardy, meaning I don't know what this question is, but I know what the answer is to this question. I'll make this smaller for a minute. I'll create my point. Avram's asking a question, but Ma'ida, and God has to answer this question. It's unclear what the question is, but when I find the answer, I can figure out the question. We call Jeopardy, like Breshit for 500. Now, Pasuk Tet is not God's answer. In Pasuk Tet, God tells Avram to do a little ceremony. So take some animals and cut them in parts. I'm going to leave that alone for now. But God's answer is clearly Pasuk Yud Gimel, correct? V'imar Avram Yodo Teda. Yodo Teda? But I'll go back to my other source sheet because I have it nice and highlighted. Share the other source sheet. Here we are. My nice in colors, etc. Avram asked, B'ma'ida. Okay. Avram asked, B'ma'ida ki Roshena. See the yellow? I'll just make a little, play with my toys here. Arrow. There we go. B'ma'ida and Yodo Teda. Understand? And therefore, I'm going to skip this whole paragraph of Tet to Yud Bet. We'll go back to. That's a ceremony. It's going to be a covenantal ceremony. The meaning of it, again, but this connection, B'ma'ida and Yodo Teda, allows me to ignore, in the meantime, Pasuk Tet to Yud Bet. That'll be something in between. But God's answer, B'ma'ida, is going to be preceded by this little action, this little covenantal ceremony. But his answer is going to be here. So let's see what the answer is, and based on the answer, we'll figure out what the question is. So let's take a look. Okay. What's he say? Oh, that's not good. Now I have to erase all this stuff. Color drawings. Now I can go back to the English for those who want to see the English. I'll be nice. I don't know why I didn't put the English. Oh, because I needed the drawing. That's why I didn't have the English before. Okay, what's got to answer? You should know, okay? Ki ger yazaracha be'eretz lo lahem. The children I promised you who'll be like the stars in the sky, before they conquer the land, they need to be strangers in someone else's land. They're going to be enslaved and oppressed. And again, 400 years I'll leave out for later on. That's a framework. When that's written, that could be Moshe Rabbeinu already when he's Chumash getting his final touches. That I'll leave that on for now. But it's a long time, 400 years. But there'll be these children that I promised you before they conquer the land are going to have to go through slavery and oppression. I'm going to punish the oppressor. And when they leave that oppression, they'll leave with great wealth. But it won't happen in your lifetime. Okay? But four generations will return here. What do you count from? Well, it's complicated, right? Because you can't conquer the land until the people living there deserve to be thrown out. That's key. You're going to conquer the land, but you can't conquer the land until the people living there deserve to be thrown out. That'll be a key theme in Chumash. Now, if this is the answer, Yud Gimel Yud Dalet is the key answer. What's God telling Avraham Avinu? That before you get the land, the children I promised you have to go through slavery and oppression and redemption, and then they'll get the land. So basically, what's Avraham asking? Not. He wants to know how it's going to happen or when. Remember, key can mean when sometimes, right? Or how do I know when it's happening, or that'll happen, or how it'll be? But God's answer is how it's going to happen. God's answer is going to take a long time. It's how and when it's going to happen. In other words, now, it makes sense in the context because what just happened? God just promised Avram children. He promised them to conquer the land, possession, but Avram just conquered the land. So I said, I just did it. What's going to be? He says, you're right, but it's going to take a long time, not in your lifetime. Basically, God's telling Avram, you're on a pilot trip. It's going to take a long time till you get the land. There'll be a long historical process before you get the land. Understand? Now, this answer is key to wool. It's half of Judaism, isn't it? The whole story, the whole Passover Haggadah starts here, doesn't it? For some reason, God wants a nation. That's clear from the first time he meets Avraham Avinu. But God's telling Avraham Avinu, I want you to become a nation, and you're going to get this land. But before you get the land and become a nation and possess it and become sovereign, you need to go through a long time period of becoming a nation in someone else's land, going through suffering and oppression and redemption, and only then will we be able to become a nation. This is like basic training to become God's nation. It's not clear why, but it's definitely something fundamental to Chumash. Now, if to become a nation and possess the land, we have to go through all this suffering, does God's opening statement make more sense now? When God said, Al Tira Avraham, what's he referring about? Don't worry. Not about children, that's a piece of cake. Lots of children. But those children are going to have to go through, and they have to go through basic training, a really difficult basic training of slavery and oppression. But I'll protect you throughout it, okay? And at the end, you'll get great schar, which sounds like the Rechush Gadol at the end, correct? Now I'm getting at God's opening statement in Pasuk Aleph is relating to the second conversation, not to the first. Because God's opening statement, Avram thought was about children. God's answer is it's about the land and becoming a nation in the land. And what God's telling Avraham Avinu, which is basically Jewish history, it's going to be long and difficult and enduring, but there'll be a purpose in it. And the goal isn't to suffer. The goal is to become a nation and to learn from that suffering. It's so key that suffering is going to become a key educational tool in our existence. And all through Chumash, it's called a Beit Avadim. It's like almost we have to go through this a household of slavery. Our original bite will be under slavery, because when we become a nation, in our national consciousness, our collective memory is how we were punished and how we were suffered, how we were mistreated, and we can't do that to others. You can't miss that theme in Chumash. We'll deal with it in the next couple of classes. But that's going to be a mega theme through Chumash. It'll be one of the key themes of definitely the Pesach holiday, but something we have to remember every single day of our lives. The experience in Egypt is going to shape our national behavior. And this is becoming a nation, and that's why it needs a brit, that's why it needs signs, it needs a covenant. But on that day, remember, God's going to make a covenant, and we'll get that land. We'll talk about the borders of the land in light of that covenant. But what I'm getting at is that if you're going to be a sovereign, God's promising sovereignty to Avraham Avinu, But to become a sovereign nation, you need to go through suffering and oppression and redemption before you can become sovereign. Now, what's the danger of sovereignty of any nation? What tends to happen when you have a sovereign nation? What do sovereign nations tend to do throughout history?
Oppress other.
Dominate and rule over others.
I say the word migrants. How do we treat migrants?
Fine.
Maybe
Now-
the message is that they shouldn't be like Haredim, as Yosef's brothers were, where it says, "Vayecha."
Okay, I'll try to keep politics out of it. because
Idolatry.
But
Okay.
in the parasha,
I want to take something real basic. God cares about all humankind. Remember, that's the universal thing. He's picking Am Yisrael to be a light to other nations. Remember, I'm pointing out there's a connection between the universal in particular. We're going to be a nation. God recognizes humans form into nations. There's 70 nations. We can be mishpachot. We can work together with our sovereignty and our strength, or we can fight each other. Now, what nations tend to do, they tend to oppress others because they can. And sovereignty, it defines nationhood, but it's dangerous because it can be misused. Now, God recognizes humans, like remember, humans by nature exert force and pressure, etc. Nations on a national level for sure do. God wants nations to be good and use their sovereignty properly. God wants a nation with sovereignty to be a model nation, but he wants to make sure that that nation uses its sovereignty properly and doesn't oppress others. We have to be the model of what we do with our sovereignty. I want to prove that to you. I'm making a big deal about it because it's a really important theme. And I'll just relate it because I don't have too much time left right to Hanukkah. Okay? Now, I need to prove this. It will take me another class to prove it properly, but it's such a key point. I want to make sure it's important. To be a nation representing God, you need land, you need people, you need nation, and you need sovereignty. It's necessary. But the danger of sovereignty is when sovereignty becomes the goal and not the tool. If I remember Yirmiyahu, the Haftarah, remember? The goal is not wealth, strength, and wealth, strength, and wisdom. They're important, right? Strength is important, but they're tools towards the higher goal of knowing God and doing chesed, tzedek, and mishpat. But to be a model nation, you need nationhood, and therefore you need land, you need sovereignty, and you need power. But power can corrupt, but can also be a great tool to accomplish great things. So we need to know what it feels like to be on the short end of being mistreated. So when we become a sovereign nation, we don't dare do that to others. And I'm going to see that. We'll see it in Tehillim, we'll see it through Chumash, we'll see it through all the Nevi'im. That'll be key. And that's the challenge of sovereignty. Now, what's God's going to say? Misuse your sovereignty, right? And God will throw you out of the land like he did to the Amorites before you. Use your sovereignty properly and he'll bless your land. Now, I'm going to jump real fast to I won't get half the source sheet done today. We'll use it for next week. But I want to jump and use this to explain Hanukkah, okay? Right. What happened? And back to the Rambam. I should have brought the Rambam down, but I'm sure you remember. The Rambam says, what's special about Hanukkah? Remember, we returned to sovereignty for the first time in Beit Sheni, and we had sovereignty for several hundred years. Less than that, but over 100 years we had sovereignty under Hasmoneans. Most of Beit Sheni we didn't have sovereignty. Now, God wants us to be sovereign, that's for sure. But we have to use our sovereignty properly. Now, what are we thanking God for? We're thanking God. Hanukkah begins like as a national holiday. Besides the time of the year, the winter solstice, that's a different topic. But the nationalistic aspect of holiday, of the Hasmonean victory, that clearly begins with Hasmoneans. And it becomes a national holiday. And that national holiday should have been nullified with all the other national holidays of the second time period in Megillat Tanit. Hanukkah remains a celebration. Okay? And the question is, why do we continue to celebrate Hanukkah after the temple is destroyed, after the Romans take over? Once we lose our sovereignty, why celebrate our sovereignty? Now, remember, there's always two reasons for the Hanukkah celebration: the military victory, the Al Nisim, and the Nespach Hashemen, correct? And I'm sure in the Yom Yom they talked about it, that in the Eretz Yisrael sources and the original sources in Sefer Maccabim, it only talks about the military victory. And Nes Pach Hashem is only in Babylonian sources much later. Right? That's why all the academics question whether it happened. That's a whole different topic. But what I'm getting at is that what makes it an eternal holiday is a Nes Pach Hashem. But therefore, that Nes Pach Hashem has to have some eternal meaning that balances the sovereignty. Now, celebrating sovereignty is wonderful when it's used properly. If you know this story that has Manians, what happened within 100 years? What do you call it? Judicial reform. Not judicial reform. What do you call it? Power struggles between the brothers, etc. Different people taking different sides with Aristobulus and Hyrcanus, etc. But by third, fourth generation, the first generation was decent. Yeah, John Hyrcanus was good, but it's got to Yanai, everyone's corrupt already. Yanai's kids, whoa, a disaster. And then the Romans take over. Everything falls apart because power got to their head. Now, if I'm going to celebrate sovereignty and remember that one day we're going to return to sovereignty, together with that celebration of hope that one day I'll return to sovereignty, comes the need to remember what to do with that sovereignty when I achieve it, and not to make the same mistakes at the Hashmonaim. And therefore, once the people don't stop celebrating Hanukkah, you follow? Hanukkah is a people's holiday. They can't stop it, and it's a national holiday. But the rabbis are going to move the focus to Nes Pach Hashem, because that's the message of that's the Haftorah we read for Hanukkah. B'lo b'chai, b'lo b'koach. That's the Chari's vision of the menorah. So I'm going to go real fast and just go through the sources of Hanukkah, which we've done before, I'm sure, just to review it. But I hope my point's clear. In other words, I went. The big theme of Brit Ben Abtenu would be sovereignty. I have to prove that in a whole share with tons of sources. But the idea of Yerusha, we'll go through all the different sources of why the word Yerusha is key, and God, the God of history. And to become a nation, we have to go through suffering and oppression and redemption from an evil oppressor, and we have to remember that. And not what happened, but why it happened, and how that's going to affect our behavior. We'll just prove that. It'll be easy to prove, but it needs to be, it's an important proof to show. It's not just a little word or gematria, it's a mega theme in Chumash and through Navi. But I want to relate it to Hanukkah. If I want to understand why this double need, the need to have a military victory and a miracle with the menorah to become an eternal holiday, all the famous questions, this is the root of what the rabbis did, of moving the focus to the miracle of the menorah. And the menorah goes back to Chagai and Zechariah and the Haftorah from because what's balancing the message of prosperity and sovereignty is going to be the message of the menorah of Zechariah. So let's take a quick look at the sources, then I'll go to the chat. So let me open my source sheet now, and I'll just go through. Okay, we talked about Yerusha and conquest. Okay, this is just real quick in Vayikra. We'll do this next week. Let's keep all my laws so the land doesn't kick you out. And then I told you, you're going to conquer the land, which I'm giving you, the Reshedotah. Okay, and that's why you're different than we have to spend the whole next week on this. This is really key. That this is going to combine together Yerusha and Leot Lachad Elohim in a beautiful way with behavior. Explain kashrut. This is tons here. We'll do it properly next week. We have all these sources to do through next week with Yerusha. But now we'll get to here. Okay. The beginning of Beit Sheni, remember, we're under Persian rule. There's no Jewish kingdom. We return in a less than an ideal way, just like Yirmiyahu predicted. After 70 years, Babylonian will fall and the Persians take over. And Koresh allows the Jews to go back and build the temple. Famous psukim, we don't have to read them. I just put it on the source sheet. You can go over it if you want. And during the reign of Koresh, Cyrus the Great, the Jews have the ability to go back and build a temple in Jerusalem, not to become sovereign, but rather to be part of the Persian Empire. But they can go back as an ethnic group. They can have religious autonomy, build their temple, go back to the land, and be a people there, a political entity without sovereignty. Okay, and anyone not going there should send money. That's a famous first UJA. Then a year later, they start building, but the first Intifada breaks out, and the local population stops them from building. They send lobbyists, and there's a building freeze for almost 20 years. From Koresh to Darius, to Daryavesh, from Koresh until Daryavesh, there's a building freeze. And then in the reign of Daryavesh, in the second year of Daryavesh, there's a new administration and a new hope. Now we can get the temple off the ground again. The people came back 20 years earlier, are down and depressed. The economy's bad, nothing's growing. Zerubbabel's their leader. He's their political leader. He's a place like the governor. Yeshua's the Kohen. He's running what should be the temple. In the meantime, there's only an altar. And the people were saying it's not time to build a house for God. And Haggai tells them, start cutting down wood, get things ready. And basically, Haggai encourages them, don't give up hope. Get to work on the temple, and God will be with you. Okay. Zechariah, in the same year, also the second year of Daryavish, tells the people, don't worry, right? Be happy. Okay? Sing and rejoice. That's the Haftarah we read yesterday. Okay, because the Shekhinah is going to return. I'll be with you. It can happen again. Haggai continues the same month. Gives them chizuk. Ata chazak Zerubbabel, chazak Yoshua, chazak kol ha'am. Okay, God will be with you. And then the first line, that Jerusalem will be great again. Gadol yeh kvod habayit zachar min harishon. Haggai said it way thousands of years ago. We're returning. Right now, it's nothing, but Jerusalem, the temple, and Jerusalem can be greater than the first temple. Right? This next temple can be greater than the first temple if you do your side, and then that's all going to be. And this was a nevuah in the 7th month. 2 months later, they break ground on the temple. On the 24th of Kislev, Erev Chanukah, Haggai gathers the people together and makes a fiery speech. It's the day before they start building the temple. Okay? It says to pay attention to this day, the day before you start putting stone on stone in God's house. So on 24th of Kislev, they have a groundbreaking ceremony, and they start working on the 25th. And that becomes an important date through Beit Sheni. That's the topic of Sefer Maccabim. It was an important date even for the Hellenists who wanted to follow it on that day. But he says, pay attention to this day, that from now on, this year, from the day you started building your temple, Yom Yisudachal Hashem, nothing was growing. Your economy is a disaster. From this day on, your produce by next year will be great. We're linking caring about the temple and building up the city and keeping the mitzvot to God blessing the nation with prosperity. And then Haggai continues, another nevuah on the same day, the same thing, and says, not only are you going to return to economic prosperity, there's going to be a big political upheaval. There'll be a big military turnover. Okay, kingdoms are going to fall, big armies are going to fall. There'll be chariots falling over each other, etc. And then on that day, Zerubbabel, you're going to become. He doesn't say you're king because that would be seditious to the Persians. He's going to hint to you'll be signing documents, but it's like he's alluding to the fact that we return to sovereignty because I've chosen you. In a nutshell, Haggai is promising a return to sovereignty and prosperity if you put your efforts in building the temple and building up the nation properly. What I call Haggai has to keep us surga. Zechariah comes along, right, and says it all depends more on Shuvah. He doesn't disagree with Haggai, but he says, in order for this to happen, you have to get your act together. It says Shuvah Lev and Shuvah Lechem. We'll see Zechariah inside in a minute. And then he has, maybe I should open up Zechariah inside. I have it open here anyhow. It's all in the second year of, where's Zechariah? Zechariah, I had it here, I thought. Here we go. Zechariah in Perek Aleph. Also, the second year of Dariah, in the 8th month, right before they break ground. He tells the people, Kol Mar Shem Tzvot, Shuvo Elaynu Hashem, Vashuva Lechem, you return to me, and I'll come back. If you want the Shekhinah to come back, you have to be worthy of it. Don't be like your ancestors who the Nevi'im called them to do tshuva and they didn't listen. Okay, follow my laws, etc., and I'll be with you. And then meantime they break ground on the temple. He has another vision in the 11th month, and this is the famous one. And the Malach prays in this vision, Ad matai lo torachem et Yerushalayim v'tarid asher zamta zeh 70 shana. How long it will take to have mercy on your city and help us return to our nationhood, etc. And God says, don't worry about it. He says, I'm zealous now for Tzion, and this makes it to Shmon Esrei. L'chein kol mar Hashem, Shavti Yerushalayim barachamim, that Yerushalayim yecha barachamim tashuv is from here. God's promising I'm going to return to Yerushalayim with midat harachamim, with mercy. My house will be rebuilt. Beti baneba, member of Yerushalayim yecha v'tishkam uvnei otcha Yerushalayim yecha barachamim tashuv v'tishkam b'tocha kasher dibarta. Is referring to this. Uvnei otcha. Okay. Beti baneba Hashem. They'll start building there. And what do you call it? And it'll say people, what do you call it? The city will grow and people will care about Zion again. God will choose again Yerushalayim will be our capital city. Zechariah is giving great hopes, but it's a function of doing proper tshuva. Then in Perek Gimel, then in Perek Bet, he said, Roni v'simchi bat Zion. Perek Gimel, he tells the Kohen to get his act together, clean your clothes, get your temple, get the priestly tribe together. And then he talks to the political leaders, to Zechariah. In chapter 4, he has a vision. There's 7 visions. The menorah is the middle one, the 4th one. And he sees this menorah with 2 olive branches on top of it. That's representing Zerubbabel and Yoshua, the political leader and the religious leader, all feeding oil to the menorah. And God asked him, what do you see? He says, I see, I don't know what it means. And then and God answers, so what I want to claim is Chayil means is always economic prosperity. Remember, like we had in Parshat Ekev. Koach is military strength. He's referring to Chagai. He's not disagreeing with Chagai. It's not only about Chayil and Koach, it's about Ruach as well. It's what you do with your Ruach and Chayil. Okay? And that's over and over again. That's Zechariah's message, especially in Perek Zayin. He tells the people want to know 2 years later, it's halfway done. Do we continue fasting on Tisha B'Av? The famous question. And he tells the people, if you want to know if it'll work, remember what the earlier Nevi'im told him. He tells the people, Mishpat emet shvotu, get your act together, do justice and righteousness, etc. Take care of the poor and the needy, all the classic things. And the main thing is in chapter 8. I'm explaining why Zechariah is so important for the message of Hanukkah. Here, Elad Vrem Yasher Tasu. Again, you can read it for homework. Elad Vrem Yasher Tasu. There's God saying, okay, I'm coming now to do good for Yerushalayim. Don't be afraid. See Al Tirao again, like Ben Abtarim. Elad Vrem, what you need to do, Dabru Emet, Ishet Re'eu, Emet Mishpat Shalom Shiftu B'Sharechem, justice and righteousness and truth, doing your thing. Don't plan and plot against your neighbor. Ishet Rat Re'al Tachshu B'Avchem. Don't play the Sinat Chinam game. Don't swear falsely, even if you think it's going to gain by it. These are things that God hates. And then he tells them the famous line, the 4 fast days can become holidays. Okay, that's a shir we've done before many times. So let me just summarize. Back to the other source sheet real fast. Where are we? Okay, that's all the Hanukkah stuff. Yeah, lo b'chai v'lo b'koach ki b'ruchi. So yeah, my time is up. So let me just finish my main point. What I think happened, because of Zechariah's nevuah, which is balancing Chagais and giving it deeper meaning. They're working like they're not disagreeing with each other. Each one's focusing on a different element of what's necessary. You need to return to prosperity and sovereignty. Those are key tools to fulfill your goal. But you have to remember that they're tools and not the ultimate goal. Don't let them get to your head. The vision of the menorah is the beautiful balance of lo b'chai v'lo b'koach ki b'ruchi. And if we're going to continue to celebrate Hanukkah as a national holiday, hoping one day we'll return to sovereignty, the message of Zechariah has to be emphasized. And therefore, making a big deal about oil, about shemen, about the menorah, and turning it into Chanukiah, it beautififully explains the meaning of the miracle and why the miracle was so necessary, irrelevant what actually happened. But I always tell my students, even if the rabbis made it up, it makes it 10 times more important, because they're telling you Zechariah, they're screaming Zechariah. We're not celebrating because a miracle happened. We're celebrating to remember what to do with our sovereignty. And I'm not making a big deal about it because it's so important to this day, especially now we return to sovereignty. And Hanukkah, instead of becoming a secular holiday of military strength, which it became, it's got to become a holiday of Ruach as well, and a balance between the two. And that's the biggest challenge we have nowadays. And that was my point for Hanukkah. Hope I made my point. Again, we have a lot to do. I have to prove the idea of Yerusha in history, and God's name Yud Kevavke, and why we need the 2 Britot, and how to play itself out at Har Sinai, and Sefer Dvarim especially. But I just moved that to Hanukkah because we have to learn Torah and it's Hanukkah today, and I want to give extra meaning to, especially nowadays. Takes on a lot of extra meaning. There's a lot of chats. What happened here? My gosh, chats. Okay, the sources. Okay, it's failed like collect. Okay, as far as collectivism and what do you call it, and individualism. Again, I was just quoting that. I'm no expert on that. I heard a class about it. It just reminded me that this balance between 2 ideals, which make a lot of sense, but don't go hand in hand, and you have to balance between them. helps me understand why, one of the reasons why Chumash might use two names for God. That's all. Okay, don't worry, very good. Moshe's heritage, okay. Okay, Morashah, we'll get to that later on when we go back to Parsha Va'era. Okay, iPhone. Okay, Rabbi, our children in the land, not both Morashah. Okay, the word Morashah we'll have to do with next week. Okay, pain is natural by God, so we serve Him in order to avoid suffering. Okay, we don't need suffering to free ourselves and serve God, rather. Okay, no, the goal is not to suffer, but when you go through suffering, it becomes something, it shapes your behavior. That's a whole different question that we have to deal with also. Why do we have to suffer? Why did one generation have to suffer for future generations? I'll try to deal with that when we deal about Brit Ben Tarim. Okay, sovereignty is dangerous, right? And therefore, a lot of people say it's so dangerous, dump it, forget it. Be a religion and don't be. The idea of sovereignty being so dangerous is not worth it. Remember, it's not the Rabbanut and things like that. It makes so much sense to say sovereignty, religion and sovereignty can't go hand in hand. It's just evil and power corrupts. To be able to have power and use it as a tool, right? That's going to be, it's Tilimine Bet in a nutshell. That's we've talked about. That's David's ethical will to Shlomo. That to be a great king, be empowered, and people bow down and respect you because of what you do with your wealth. That was this week's parsha with Miketz. God says you'll have 7 years of plenty. Use the years of plenty to help the people during years of famine, not to rip them off in business, but to help the people. It's save it for future use. Again, that's a topic we'll have to deal with next week. The Hanukkah connection. What happened to Hasmoneans in the end was a disaster. Exactly. Okay, precisely. Very good. Serving and not destined, but journey. Halacha. Okay. Power corrupts. Okay. Power corrupts, but it's better than nothing. Okay. So this life. When God tells Avram al Tirah, okay, Gershom, right? When God tells Avram al Tirah, the beginning of Brit Ben Tarim, don't be afraid. He's not only inspiring Rabbi Nachman, but telling him, okay, I want to keep Israeli politics out of it. I did enough on my own already. But everyone has a good point. It's not people are right and wrong. There's logic to them. No, they're not evil. They mean well. You can maybe have to re-educate them, but their goals, they're not evil people. We might disagree with their education and thing, but the fact I don't agree with them doesn't mean I sort of feel sorry that they're the way they're educated, but that's a whole different topic. So I'm going to stay away from today.
You may want to keep Israeli politics out of it, but the Torah itself uses the word "vayecherdu,"
Okay.
clearly anticipating what
Okay, maybe it's prophetic.
it did.
Charedim advar Hashem. Okay. Okay. Chaim Memorial Zacharias menorah. Okay. That's right. It's more our menorah. It's true. There's so much there. We have to do it properly, but it has to do with the Mikdash and what the meaning of the Mikdash is. There's so much behind it. But what I tried to do today is take that theme of covenant, the need for two covenants, with Elokim and Yud Kei Vav Kei. If I had time to show you, the menorah having 7 branches has to do with Elokim, with nature, oil, nature, refining nature, right? Turning something physical into light. That's so awesome. It's built into the menorah. What the menorah does symbolizes taking koach to ruach, basically it's a refinery, taking something physical, olive oil, and turning it into light, and which only humans do. It's such a chap of part of our Tzelem Elokim. So it's so symbolic the menorah. It's right on the mark. Okay, and okay. Any other questions about Peh before I get myself in trouble? Jay, you had announcements?
Well, I did them in the beginning. I like I said, Dr. Spear is not teaching tomorrow night, nor is he teaching on January 6th. So we resume on the 6th, the 13th of January. But Rabbi Shulman is teaching this week. So Rabbi Shulman and Shuli will be giving their regular classes this week, not Rabbi Helfgott and not Dr. Mark. And we will have our regular Parsha Shir this week. Adina Berkowitz is going to be giving it. I'll be giving my Siddur class on Friday. So we will have still lots to learn as we come towards Hanukkah. And then really in 2 weeks, we're going to launch, our whole winter series. We have some of it's up on the website. We'll still have some classes next week, and then we'll have about, I think, 10 classes starting when the second week in January. So do keep abreast of that. And if anybody has yet to, and even if you have, if you'd like to make a donation before 2024, you'll save money on your taxes. So, and we'll benefit. So it's a win-win situation. So that will be greatly appreciated. It's December 29th today. 29th today. So only 3 days left. I believe 40% of donations in Canada are made in December, which is not surprising. It's amazing how December is more powerful than Rosh Hashanah. More money is given before December 31st than the Yom Hadin on Rosh Hashanah. That's life, the tax collector. There's the only two things in life we're certain are taxes. Well, I guess that, whatever, but okay. So please donate generously. We would greatly appreciate it. And that's the only way we can do all the programs. That is the honest truth.
By the way, that
We're
defines
100% dependent on your help. Yes.
Yeah.
Rabbi, what do you want to say?
Sovereignty is defined by the right to bear arms and to collect taxes. And they go hand in hand, because if you don't have an army, you can't collect
No
taxes.
representation without
taxes, you can't pay your
taxation.
army. So they
See,
go
we're
hand in
very
hand.
nice. We it should be no without taxation, no representation.
If God blesses us with plenty, it's in order to be a trustee, to help
Yes.
others. So it's
Yes.
can fulfill it very nicely.
Anyways, and the government's very nice. The government pays for a lot. If you want to be really nice, you donate your stocks. It only costs you 25%. I don't think they have that in the United States. But in Canada, just out of interest for anything, this is really amazing. If you donate something that's gone up in value, you have a capital gain, there's no capital gains tax. So which is basically could be 25%, whatever, without getting into details. So basically, if you have Apple shares or Microsoft or anything that's gone up in value, any bank except TD Bank, whatever, if you know what I'm talking about. So when you donate your shares, basically the government is paying for 75% of it. It's only costing you 25%, like the capital gain portion, which is truly unbelievable. They did that in COVID. No, I'm sorry. The government passed that in the recession in 2008 as a way to encourage wealthy people to give more charity, because literally that people sitting on millions of dollars in capital gains. So this way, if they donated, the government's paying it up, even more depending on your tax situation, could be more than 75%. So that's an amazing thing. I do that all the time now. That's why I give charity. I look at any stocks I have, and I don't donate money. I just donate shares. I have the family, whatever. My father set up a charity foundation. I donate the shares, and we write the check from the shares, and then let the government. I can save extra tax money. That's just talk to your accountant. That's for anything you give. I don't think it works in the States though. But I'm not I actually am a CPA, but I don't practice. I haven't practiced in the States for 30 years. But I originally did. Nobody cares about what I'm saying, but I'm just saying I did.
It also doesn't work if you don't have stocks.
I'm sorry. Yeah. It also doesn't.
work.
I'll end with the story Beryl Wine told. Beryl Wine told in the first Gulf War. Beryl Wine said he was sitting on a plane. He was speaking in Toronto, sitting on a plane in the beginning of the Gulf War in 1991. And the guy next to him was fetching, oi, and they said, "What's going on?" He says, so he was looking at his stock portfolio, and he had lost so much money. So Beryl Wine said, "Baruch Hashem, I haven't lost any money. I don't have." So it's only, although if you understand how the stock market works, even if you don't have money in the stock market, you lose money when it goes down. But that's a different story. Anyways, okay, enough of that. Anybody be well. We should be matzliach. We should be blessed that you can give a lot of money so you can give a lot away. That's the tremendous blessing. So many wonderful causes, and obviously Israel is first and foremost in our mind. But anyways, your help is greatly appreciated. Okay, and we'll see you soon. I see there are new messages coming. I don't know what people are writing it to their about.
That's just the end of the stuff.
All right, Rabbi. Okay, have a good one. You lit Hanukkah. It's already the fifth night already. You're into the fifth night. We're just in the fourth days here still. We're a little behind the times, but what can we do? Okay. Chag Sameach, everybody. Be well. Okay, we should be well, everybody. Bye-bye.